Evening, everybody. As I say, Dr. Joe McGurr here, and welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining me for our 1 hour presentation on grants to assist audio-active members in our community with your applications for grants. And I want to thank you all for the work that you do for our communities. I see many of you there, and I know the work that you do. So can I just say thank you for that, and thank you for participating. We will be recording tonight's event. It's already started, of course, and a recording will be sent to all those who participated, and we'll have that on our website as well, in case you want to go over and miss something. Can I begin before I introduce Keith, can I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today, and for me, that is the Wiradjuri people. I think that's probably the case for many of you. And I wish to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future, for they hold the knowledge, the stories, and traditions. And I'd like to extend my respect to all the other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be present today. So thank you for that. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to our mentor, teacher, tutor, and host, the grants guy himself, Keith Whelan. Keith, lovely to have you here. I'm going to leave it in your hands from here till the finish. Thank you. And just if everyone could go on mute, that's usually, I notice everyone is on mute, so that's usually better. Okay, thanks, Keith. Over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Great to be here, folks. Great to get you along here. Thanks for attending. Let's get that grant for you. And I acknowledge, like Joe, the great work you're doing in the community, whatever organization you're representing here today. Quintessentially, I want to give you the 3 C's that I want you to remember. If you remember anything from this webinar, it is the 3 C's of grants writing: clear, concise, and compelling. That's a well-written grant application, or short, succinct, and to the point. That's what we're looking for. No waffle, no wordology, no long-winded sentences. It is what it is. So I'm looking for impact statements. It's won or lost in the first 20 words to the answer of each question. I'm looking for stats and facts, tangible data that can't be argued against. Make a statement, back it up. I'm looking for no waffle and wordology, which means editing, proofreading, and drafting. I'm looking for you quintessentially just to answer the question at the end of the day, rather than basically putting in copy and paste text from any plans you have. And the expectation from any funding body is you're extrapolating from an organizational business plan, project plan, and CapEx, which is your budget, at the end of the day to write the grant application. But clear, concise, compelling, short, succinct, and to the point, quintessentially, that's what I'm looking for in a well-written grant application. That's the 3 C's. The 3 P's, plan, process, procedure, is having a plan to be grant ready as an organization, which means having a grants calendar, knowing what grants are coming up, having a targeted approach to the grants, okay, rather than whimsically doing last-minute grant applications, hoping for the best at 4:55 p.m, pressing send and thinking you're going to succeed. So it's very much having a plan, a process, how many grants you're going to apply for, understanding a go, no go strategy. Why waste time and effort on a grant application? Inherently, you're never going to get it. And a plan, process, and procedure, that you have a procedure about auditing, acquittal, and evaluation, that you obviously may get the grant, and you need to do the auditing, the acquittal, and the evaluation inherently for yourself as an organization. But the expectation obviously is for the funding body as well, that you're reporting back that you spent the money on time and on budget. So that's the 3 P's. Then the 3 R's: research, relationship, reporting. Have you got a complete list of what grants are out there, given that there are 39 grants opening across all sectors in Australia per day? There are 27 grants closing per day across all sectors in Australia. So do you know what grants you should be applying for, and more importantly, what grants you shouldn't be applying for, and what you're eligible for and what you're eligible not to apply for? And then obviously relationship. A lot of the funding bodies, particularly philanthropic, expect you to have correspondence with them beforehand, which means emails, phone calls, attending their workshops or webinars, and even having a coffee with them. So very much understanding that they want a relationship with you, particularly philanthropic, but also government as well. And government expects you to be talking to them in advance. For issues of probity, I can't talk to you during the funding round when it's open, but indicatively, you need to be having a relationship. People need to know you to support you. So have a profile so they know you exist so I can give generously, which means having relationship with Dr. McGurr and understanding what you're trying to achieve for the community so he can support you as one of your local members. Same with your federal member, same with your local members at council, as well as other supporting agencies and bodies as well. And they're quintessential, obviously, in terms of getting letters of support to substantiate your application as well. So that's research, relationship, and reporting, as I said. And inherently, this has been a bugbear for funding bodies that no one's doing an evaluation. No one's basically doing an update on where the grant is. No one's basically giving them a report back as to how you spent the money, when you spent the money. So again, get in the habit of doing that and get in the habit of doing grants writing, basically, but have a targeted approach to what you're doing rather than a scattergun approach of just applying for any grant because it's open. Have a more targeted approach for your organization and what you're eligible to apply for at the end of the day. Okay. So this is where most of us are at, obviously, when we do last minute grant application. Hands up if you've done last minute grant application. It's not a very exclusive club. All right. Not many VIPs, right? We've all been in there. All right. So very much don't do it. As a grants assessor, I see a haphazard approach to grants writing, which means people doing it last minute and inherently they fail. And that's where you don't want to be at the end of the day. What is the one guarantee I can give you tonight in terms of grants writing in Australia? Rejection. You're not going to get the grant. It's that competitive. Okay. So you need to think about a way of having a targeted approach, the right grant, and knowing what that is, and then doing the lead into that now for 2023. Okay. So as I said, no last minute grant applications because they're littered with errors. I've seen budgets with no totals. I've seen application forms that haven't been signed. The old fundamentals of the English language, grammar, syntax, punctuation, and spelling, inherently important. If it looks like a sloppy application, must be written by a sloppy organization. So again, very much, I've been in Australia now 15 years, as you can tell from the accent. And I think I can say this, that Australians write the longest sentences known to man. You don't believe in commas or full stops in this country. So I'm very much about commas and full stops. I'm telling you what I'm really about as a grants assessor. Bullet points and subheadings, love those. All right, bullet points and subheadings. And I love white space rather than Egyptian hieroglyphics, blocks of text that I can't read, can't decipher, can't understand. So keep it simple. Common sense approach to grants writing. This is not a test of your Dickensian or Shakespearean language skills. It's a test basically being matter of fact. All right. So that's why I love stats and facts, tangible data that can't be argued against. Okay. Because as a community organization, I'm expecting you to obviously provide me a copy of your P&Ls, your profit and loss statement, your financial resilience, because obviously I'm going to give you money for the grant, but I'm not going to pay for operational running costs of your community organization. So I want to see this money there. I want to see two big words for any grant application that you're going to have to guarantee them, right? Innovation and sustainability. And that's what they want to see from you as a community organization, innovation and sustainability, and how you're quantifying and qualifying each one of those. And you're quantifying and qualifying through qualitative and quantitative data. Again, that you've done a survey, you've done research, you've polled, you've talked to people, you've justified in your business case and in your argument in your grant that you're much needed, much desired, have great community impact. So government want to see social inclusion, social cohesion, community capacity building. So you may be an organization that's been here for 100 years, 50 years, 2 years. How are you measuring your community impact? What are you doing for the community? How are the community benefiting from you? How would it be detrimental if you weren't here for the community? All of those things. All right. So you need to go back and look at yourself as an organization, because a grant is a glorified sales pitch. And that's what I'm asking you to do, is sell yourself in a grant application. All your virtues and values, all the great things that you're doing and have done for years. Okay. But obviously you have a limited framework to do that because you've got a word count. There's only so much words you can include. So that means drafting, editing, proofreading. And that means creating templates, a budget template, a project template in advance, basically at the end of the day. So there's a lot of considerations. I'm not trying to give you loads of homework, but I'm trying to get you grant ready. okay, at the end of the day. So take a proactive approach to it rather than a reactive approach, because most of you are volunteer-based, which means you have issues around time and capacity. You're already busy, right? You're busy being volunteers. You're busy committing to society and to the community. Now, where do you find time to write the grant? So and grants are an onerous obligation. There's a huge amount of work that goes into them, all right? So what you put into this is what you're going to get out of this. And it's, as I said, a two-part process between the application and actually delivering on it, basically, then if you've been awarded the funding. So there's a lot to think about, whether you can commit to this, whether you get the resources, the logistics, the personnel to write it. So I said to volunteer organizations, yeah, you can get a grants writer in at a cost, but obviously there may be someone on your committee, maybe someone who's a volunteer, who's a retired teacher, journalist, business person, lecturer, okay? Anyone who's articulate in writing a business case or a business document. That's who you need. All right, as I said, it's a very much common sense approach. So it's very much the KISS principle, keep it simple. It's very much identifying a SWOT analysis, selling your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats, and very much then being matter of fact, basically what you're saying and you're doing and selling all that to me. But have a plan. They just want to see a plan. So government expect one thing in the first instance, which is VFM, which is government's favorite acronym, value for money, because it's taxpayers' money, got to be spent with great probity and transparency and authenticity. So you got to give them the assurance that the money will be spent on time and on budget without any misappropriation. But secondly, they want to see a plan for what you're proposing. So that could be, if it's an infrastructure project, I'll need to see architect's drawings, I'll need to see a master plan, I'll need to see potentially even drone footage. We're looking at video components now to a lot of the grant applications. I need to see a plan, okay? Infographics, all of these things I need to see more than ever before. They'll want to see community consultation. They want to see letters of support. They want to see a cost-benefit analysis. In other words, if you build it, will they come? So you need to quantify and qualify everything you're saying in a grant application. Don't be speculative, be tangible. Everything is evidence-based. Okay, so dot the I's and cross the T's, but very much it must make sense to read it, and it needs to flow. It needs to be a piece of business storytelling, where you've come from as an organization, where are you as an organization, and where you're going as an organization with government investment and funding. And as I said, this is not just applicable to the 3 tiers of government funding you can apply for, local, state, and federal. You should also, if you're eligible as a charity, to apply for philanthropic funding as well. And that's a huge amount of money that's out there. Indicatively, over $400 million was dispensed last year alone in Australia from philanthropy. So again, it's having a plan. The other expectation from government is you're not putting all your eggs in one basket with a grant. That your grant is your get out of jail card for your organization. It's going to be your financial sustainability. They want to see how else you're raising capital. And that's through other grants, fundraising, sponsorship, crowdfunding, bequests, donations, etc., etc. That's an articulate organization. That's an organization I can invest into. Okay. This is your first template, because in some way, shape, or form, you're getting asked these questions in a grant application. Who are you? What do you do? Where do you do it? When do you do it? Why do you do it? And how much money do you want for it? That's what you have to answer in terms of the questions. So be mindful of that, basically, that these are the quintessential questions that need answered in some way, shape, or form in your grant application. So which means do the template in the first instance and populate accordingly. Utilize, don't plagiarize, extrapolate then from your template and populate that into your grant application. An indicative grant question now would be, please provide a brief overview of your application. Of your organization, excuse me. Brief being the operative word there, right? This is, as I said, it's an elevator pitch. All right. So you do not have the word count to be expansive. You need to be very deliberate. And so, like an old journalistic adage, count your words and make your words count. Okay. So research what funding's out there, as I said, have a relationship with the funding body, talk to them in advance, see if you're best fit, not only in terms of eligibility, but they want to fund a project like yours. And I'm talking particularly philanthropic, and given the focus on regional areas where you are, basically, there's a huge focus now. I mean, the biggest 2 sectors that are funded in Australia in terms of grants funding are health and education. Okay. So after that, in no particular order, you're looking at sport, you're looking at arts, you're looking at Aboriginality, you're looking at multiculturalism. Okay. You're looking at the environment. You're looking at, obviously, business sector. Okay. So again, where are you placed in terms of that? What's your ask? What's your plan to substantiate your ask? And then do the reporting thereafter as well. So it's really this two-part process, right? But even because people are doing last-minute grant applications, they're rushing straight to the application form. They're not conceptualizing why the grant's been there, what it's there to do. You need to look at the background to the grant, why it's been formulated, why was it given previously, to whom, for what, for how much, who else has got the funding, what have they got funding for, what has been the likelihood of what they like to fund vis-a-vis what they don't like to fund, why have they conceptualized it, why have they brought it to market. It's not what you want to achieve, it's what the funding body wants to achieve, and there is a difference. So stop selling on behalf of yourself. Don't be a silo. Think about the joint unison approach that you can take with the funding body to enact what you want to achieve. And when I say don't be a silo, also there's a second part to that, which means think about collaboration. Government loves collaboration with other entities in your society and in your community. Okay. So think about how you can have a greater leverage for the funding across a wider demographic and geographic. All right. So there's a lot of considerations. So this is why you need this checklist, you need this mind map, you need time to think about the right grant rather than just rushing in headlong because someone's told you and provided a link to you that there's grants opening, it's closing on Friday. Let's find a way to come up with a grant application for $50,000. I don't subscribe to that. And this is really your checklist. All right. I'll try to synopsize this down as best I can, that you need to be seen to be building capacity in your community. You have a sustainability of approach. You're creating a profile for your business. And I use that word deliberately. You may be a not-for-profit, you may be a charity, you may be a school, you may be a sports club, you may be a community group. You're still a business. Profit, loss. So it's very much, you need to consider yourself as a business in that regard. Planning your grant application, be proactive, not reactive, that you have a grants calendar. The acquittal of the grant, all the mandatory reporting that you got to do, that you, in the first instance, you should have a project plan or a business plan and a budget. And your application must connect with me, communicate quite clearly what your ask is, and show me how you're going to deliver on time and on budget. It's easy when you say it fast in an Irish accent, isn't it? But it's very much that you need to break these down and go back through each one of them. So as this webinar is being recorded, I'd advocate you go back and watch it again and break down the pieces of this for yourself, okay? Now, I will be opening up for questions at the end, both in the chat room and for you to unmute yourself and talk to me as well. Hopefully we have time to do that. So we'll try and get through the presentations and set as best I can. This is my favorite quote, and I think this sums it up from Andrew Thomas, who's the former CEO of Perpetual, who are a huge funding body, give out over $100 million nationally in philanthropy. It's a business case based on outcomes rather than relying on emotional appeal. Any grant application is based on inputs, outputs, outcomes. Inputs, what you're putting in. Outputs, basically what's going to happen with the money. Outcomes, the greater translatable effect for society. If you're basically going in there with a begging bowl attitude, you're not going to get the grant. This is an investment, not a gift. It's not a handout. I'm looking for ROI and KPIs, return on investment, and key performance indicators, measurables, okay? Because it's getting more and more competitive, okay? It's getting more and more competitive out there in terms of basically the amount of organizations. So, I mean, we have what, 47,000 listed not-for-profits and charities in Australia? It's a lot asking for money, all right? So federal government's oversubscribed 12 to 1. And even any grant funding round, any grant dollar to give you, they expect a transformative effect of a 3 to 1 return, not just dollar for dollar. Okay, so the bar has firmly been set. So what funding bodies are looking for from you? Well, who are you? What do you want the money for? How does this link to your strategic plan and their strategic plan for the sector? How and who will it impact? What's your strategy and your storytelling that you're embodying in your grant application? What's the total project value? Because you may be only asking for a component of the project. And people give to people, not the projects, which means I have to know you, to like you, to fund you, which means profile. So very much you need to think about that basically. Okay, so massive opportunity there to people can only help you to know you exist. Profile. Because as a funding body, obviously, if you get shortlisted, what am I going to do? I'm going to Google you, right? I'm going to look at your social media. I'm going to look at your website. I'm going to see your profile, which means it needs to correlate to what you're saying on your website. It needs to correlate what you're saying in your grant application. So they're not just buying an output, they're buying an outcome to invest in positive impact. I want to see tangible evidence of change. I want to see a strategy that shows that you're going to do something basically what has a real effect in society. Evidence demand, proof of outcome as best you can, trying to factor in the intangibles in the community sector and measuring the impact against that. And for applicants to stop talking about activities and projects, talk about impacts. Don't just tell me how you're going to do it, tell me what's going to happen because of it. That's the end result. And the end result is not your organization. The end result is who you're catering for, who you're dealing with, who you're providing for. An organization, that's who's going to benefit. That's who you need to translate. Okay. So your grants checklist, again, even to synopsize even further, are there grants for us? Once we identify those grants, are we eligible to apply? Do we have a full comprehensive list, or we need a better calendar, grants calendar to show us what's out there? Then we have to do the writing of it, the editing of it, the proofreading of it, and the submitting of it. Then we actually awarded the funding, and then we have to deliver on time and on budget, and then we have to do the reporting and the acquittal. These are the steps you must take. Now you must factor time management and project management against that and your resources, okay? So it's using the ADA formula to write persuasively. I subscribe to this, many others do, in many other business writing formats. And that's what you got to capture the attention of the grants assessor, show the interest, the desire, the action. It's a glorified sales pitch, as I said. So I'm looking for those impact statements, 10 to 15 words at most, okay? Again, I want you to be straight to the point in terms of what you're asking, what you're saying, and substantiating it, okay? So stats and facts, make a statement, back it up, okay? Evidence-based strategy, basically, to what you're doing, okay? So again, thinking about, do I need to collaborate with others who can substantiate my application, auspice my application at the end of the day if I don't have that capacity to do that at the end of the day? There's a lot of money being handed out in grants. Someone has to get it. It might as well be you. But you need to substantiate that with an articulate business case. So when beginning to write, you need to consider, well, who you're writing to, who's your audience, what they expect you to be saying to them, what they expect to be reading in terms of your grant application. What's the primary purpose of your document? Well, you need to sell it. Why should a reader care about your message? Because I'm inundated with applications. I'm oversubscribed. Why you? Why here? Why now? When and where does the action take place? When is this going to be looked at in terms of government timeframes? Because you can't start until I tell you to when to start, basically, in terms of funding. So government's other favorite phrase is shovel ready, and rightly so. But until we commit to the government contract, you can't start the project. So it'll be deemed retrospective, null and void. I know you needed the money yesterday, but we can't start until we're actually agreed to start. So that could be next year, could be 6 months, could be 6 weeks, as decreed on a case-by-case basis with the grant. So you need to be very mindful of this. And what are your expected outcomes? Okay. No speculative, I want tangibles, basically, as best you can. Okay. What makes for a successful proposal? Well, our program or projects within the scope of the funding area of giving, sufficient documentation supported with facts, and a project that reflects people's needs, not organization needs. Members of the general community, what they need. Members of the general public, what they need. Your members, your volunteers, the people you serve, what are they going to get out of it? Okay. Now, why are projects declined? I could spend all evening on this, to be honest with you, but I've synopsized it down to 2 slides. And when you read through these, folks, these bullet points, you'll see very much they are a common sense approach. Nothing here that should shock and awe you. Okay, it's very much basically just being matter of fact. Okay, because people, unfortunately, as a grants assessor myself, have been speculative in terms of the grants application and have just, again, thought about it from a point of view of even entitlement the whole way through to basically, please give generously. As I said, this is a business transaction. This is an investment, not a gift. So again, you need to substantiate that this is a business case worthy of investment. Okay. So again, can't be too ambitious in what you're doing. You need to be realistic in terms of expectation and money. So does that mean you want to do a pilot project rather than a full-scale project? All right. AIM obviously will decree what you're asking for in terms of numeric value. Understand where you are to where you need to be, basically, in terms of service capabilities. Okay. Measuring outcomes. Question that's becoming very popular in grant applications is, how do you define success? Great question, isn't it? But I've actually had people going, very well, full stop, is the answer to that question. Not what I'm looking for as a response. Okay, so again, you must substantiate what success look like, what success of the project is going to look like, what success of the funding is going to look like, because you should be measuring everything you're doing. for the betterment of your organization, for the betterment of service delivery, and for the betterment of the funding. So they're looking now for a goal statement or objective statement, which is your vision statement or mission statement for your organization. What are you setting out to achieve? What are you doing? How well are you doing it? How are you measuring it? What traction are you having in the community? To what degree? Now, you may think, but we've never done this before, Keith. And I understand why you might say that, and I appreciate that, and I acknowledge that. But I work with Mensheds, U3A, Probus, a number of other community organizations, Country Women's Association in the past, who've all just pivoted and went, you know what, we just can't keep not doing this. We need to look at where we are to where we need to be in terms of sustainability, and we need to build this in. So it is taking a medium to long-term view to where you are to where you need to be as an organization. But that's where you want to be anyway, because you want to be sustainable. You want to be here in 10 years' time. You want to be here in 20 years' time. You want to hand over your legacy to the next committee. Okay? It's succession planning 101. Now, I want that quality assurance as a funding body, because why would I invest into an entity that's not going to be around next year? Okay? So again, you got to show me that you're financially viable. You got to show me that you have a plan. You got to show me you got the resources, the logistics, the personnel to deliver against this. And you got to show me that you're knowledgeable about your service sector and you're partnering. Don't be a silo, as I said. So again, everything I'm saying there in terms of measuring outcomes, that's what you got to delineate. Okay. So this is indicative from state government in New South Wales, a past grant application. This is what I do when I get a grant application. I highlight the key words or underline them, and that's what I answer. Okay. Primary purpose, brief overview, description, what your project will do, how you're going to achieve those objectives in 500 words or 3,000 characters. Not a lot, right? Average A4 page is 250 words. So you're going to chew through words very fast. Demonstrate. What's demonstrate meaning? This show. Need to see a case study. Okay, or a mini case study. So break it down, highlight the key words. There it is again, government's favorite phrase, value for money. Implementation, describe, demonstrate your experience. Again, show me through a case study, and you could have 4 subheadings: developing, delivering, managing, monitoring. Break it down, spell it out, make it easier for me to read. It's not the most exciting day of my life when I'm a grants assessor, I'll be honest with you. All right. I read a lot of waffle and wordology, a lot of inflated text. And as I said, it's not a test of that at all. Okay. So it's very much basically make it easy for me to digest and understand it. Because I'm not a subject matter expert necessarily. I may be, but I may not be. So to reiterate again from the start, a well-written grant application is clear, concise, and compelling, or short, succinct, and to the point. You can't write like you talk. You can't be expansive. Although saying that, certain federal government grants now are actually videoing responses. You're actually sitting in front of the camera and orally dictating responses. So it's interesting where the sector is going. But very much in the written format, basically, it's a lot of inflationary language that doesn't need to be there. Superfluous language, cut it out, which means you need to edit, proofread, and do a sanity check. And need someone with objectivity to read through it and go, I get it, I understand it, it makes sense, or I don't have a clue what you're talking about. Someone needs to do that. So again, do the report for them, organizations properly insured. Big thing for government, and I totally subscribe to this, and rightly so, because it's best practice, risk management. Okay, you got to be all across risk management or risk matrix, basically identified not only for your organization, but risk management for the project. All right, I didn't want to see a plan against that. And again, if you're doing a project, it's legal permission, right? So you're on Crown land, you're on council land. Have you got a letter of dispensation around that? Do you still need a DA? All of these things are considerations, right? They can't just be thought of when the grant goes live and when it opens, because it's going to take time. Is the DA pending? Is it confirmed? You might have to wait till the next funding round. Okay. There is no point submitting a grant application that's half-baked, that's going to be a black mark against you as an organization because it's sloppy, slipshod, and very much doesn't sell the virtues and values of what you're trying to do. I'd be better off waiting till the next funding round next year, when you have a better chance of putting something articulate together. 50-50 funding is very popular at the moment, particularly with local government. Cost offset, risk offset for them, but very much part of... Sorry. Okay, I'll just continue. So you have to have the financial contribution. So very much match funding, okay? Not just in-kind resources, but very much match funding. So you got to put up the financial now so that you have that. And again, don't be speculative with a grant, right? Certain government agencies, departments, again, the federal government have made it mandatory to attend the workshop or the webinar, which is the information on it. And rightly so, I think, again, because if you have a question, talk to them, right? Use the free phone line, use the email, attend the webinar, the workshop session on it at the end of the day. All these things you need to think about, because don't be speculative. Look at the FAQs, right? Frequently asked questions, as they're updated by the funding body in terms of responses from other applicants. That's key moving forward. So you got to think about being a suitable applicant, applying for the right grant as an organization. Very, very important in that regard, rather than just any grant. Just because the grant is there doesn't mean you apply for it, which may sound like a ridiculous statement, but I'd rather you have a targeted approach of top 10, top 20 grants you apply for. Okay, because I deal with organizations at a state-based or national level. One, even today, we're reviewing, they put in 67 grant applications so far this year. 67. All right. Can you imagine trying to resource all that? So you should apply for grants that suit particular identified needs for your organization, taking into account the time and deliver the grant, available grantors for type and purpose, the grantor's requirements, when the funds are needed, and your organization's policies, theirs and yours. Policy, plan, procedure. Again, government want quality assurance, that you understand basically that you have good governance, best practice, financial responsibility, fiscal responsibility in terms of the grant, and operate professionally. Those amateur days are now over as a community organization. So how does your mission align with the funding body's core priorities? What they want to achieve is what you want to achieve, and vice versa. How do you collaborate with others? How you play nicely in the sandpit, as I said. Very much that I want to see who else you're partnering with in your community, in your sector, to add value, because I want a greater translatable value for the funding as much as possible across a wide demographic and geographic, but also wide service sector. So talk about the need for funding the commercial potential investment. They haven't invested in this area before. They haven't invested in this geographical area before. It's brand new. It's version 2.0. You got to talk about VFM and WFM. So VFM, I already explained, value for money. WFM is what's in it for me. Very pertinent to the philanthropics. How can we leverage their corporate social responsibility of committing funding into the area? Market opportunity. Have they given a grant in this area before? Again, geographically or sector-based? Maybe not. Then sell that. In management capability, certain government grants now are asking for bios of the people on your committee and board, their qualifications, their experience based on decisions they have to make with money. That you have the right people making those decisions and giving them that quality assurance again. And then the local, state, or national benefits to the funding, the knock-on effect of what you're creating, how it can be propagated, translated, utilized elsewhere in your community, wider communities across New South Wales, or even Australia. So know the program rules, know the rules that are associated with the grant, what you can apply for, what you can for. Plan your application, be creative but honest. Don't say you can do it in 12 months when it's going to take you 18 months to do it. Research successful grants, provide information required, no more, no less. Answer the question you're asked, not what you think you're asked, and no superfluous information. It's either on the page or it's not on the page. I'm not going to fill in the gaps as a grant assessor. Okay. And again, can you answer these questions? This is from the funding center from our community, which I think is very beneficial. There's a number of service providers out there on grants, well worth taking a look at. But again, you need this precursor, the statement of need, this go, no go, basically. Going, are we applying for the right grant? Should we wait till the next funding round? Why rush this? Okay. A lot to consider, but worth considering. Why waste time and effort on a grant that you're never going to get? Okay. So again, you can go back through these and take note of them in the recording that will be sent out to you as well. Again, strong evidence. It's all evidence-based. No speculation. I get a lot of, we are the premier organization in the area. Oh yeah, who gave you that ranking? Oh, we did. And I'm like, no, that's unsubstantiated, all right? So I get it, a lot of speculation, all right? So again, think about your presence before you even apply for the grant. Think about your profile. Think about how people can support you, all right? And think about how you're raising capital, as I said, through other alternate revenue streams to substantiate the grant application, through other grants, fundraising, sponsorship, crowdfunding, bequests, donations, etc. So that means having a profile, right? Now, I'm not saying you have to use all of these. Just use what's pertinent and relevant for your organization. Have a public profile. I mean, I deal with community groups where their last Facebook post was August 2009. And I'm just like, that's not current, topical, and relevant. All right. So again, you got to be thinking about what's going to give you traction out there, that I can go look at you, find you, see the work you're doing outside of the grant application as well, because you've only got restricted practice in a grant application of how much content you can put in, right? So again, give me an opportunity to see everything else that you're doing. Okay. So have a presence. And obviously what I haven't put on there is your website. Okay. One of the first things I'm going to go to. So grants about telling a story, painting a picture with words. Yes, it is. It's about having a plan, not being there at the last minute with 5 minutes to go, pressing send and hoping for the best. Proactive rather than reactive. Again, have a grants calendar, know what's coming up in public and private sector funding and what you're eligible to apply for. People can only help you if you know you exist. Profile. And cultivating a relationship with that funding body. Very pertinent in the philanthropic sector, but just as pertinent with your local MPs, with your local government agencies, with the departments. All right, and working with them and showing the translative effect of what you can do by working together and what signify to them that you will be applying for funding from them. All right, so you're going to be doing reporting, as we've talked about all throughout this. 4 accountability principles I need you to align to: that equity, access, transparency, and responding appropriately. That's what your organization is all about. Small questions serve as big ones. We have quantified and qualified as assessors over the years that people make mistakes on the small questions rather than the big questions. Interesting, isn't it? So it's the little things that catch people out. So make sure you spend as much time equilibrium on all questions, and beware of trade-off thinking. Government may ask you to move the goalposts in terms of basically the funding you're asking for, a diminished amount, or in terms of flexibility of operations, that you're proposing one thing, they're saying, well, you may need to scale that back. I would indicatively like to see that you have the flexibility of your modeling and your design of your project that you're proposing, that you can move that as decreed by government. An immovable object, not so necessarily welcomed. So again, think about that in terms of your design and implementation of what you're proposing and seeking funding for. Work with other connectors in the community. I'm a big believer in your public representatives, obviously your state and federal members. Obviously your councillors, local government themselves, government agencies and departments and other affiliated bodies you may be part of. Who is in your organization as a volunteer, as I said, or a committee member that has written a grant, knows how to write a grant, has done business writing in the past, is understanding of the nuances of grants writing, may have written tenders professionally for a commercial firm. Okay. And then the local, state or federal government affairs, what's happening, what are they saying, what are they awarding funding for? What's the narrative? What are the focal points in government? Obviously, at the moment, we have a lot on mental health, female participation in sport, and the main service areas I mentioned earlier on. Okay. Quite wide and varied, but where do you fit in? So again, effectiveness and efficiency, 2 words I love. You know, I mean, words are key to this, obviously, right? It's having a narrative, right? So are you robust, agile, effective, efficient, sustainable, innovative? You got to think about the adjectives, the nouns, the pronouns, and the verbs that describe your organization, that leap off the page. Because I may do a skim read, and I will do a skim read in the first instance as a grants assessor, rather than doing a thorough read in the second read. What words would you use to describe your organization? Trusted foundations trying to seek a return on investment, given the intangibles of trying to measure what's happening in the community. And I talked about inputs, outputs, outcomes before, and I just wanted to give you an example of outputs and outcomes there. Okay. The benefit, the effect, where the money's going, what it's doing, the translative effect. All these things. Again, quantify and qualify. Okay. Now, I know I'm giving a lot of homework. The expectation is you do this in a staged approach. I don't expect you to do all this overnight. It's very much, again, thinking in deliberate fashion, as you would with any other way of raising capital for your organization, about basically what grants to approach, what grants are best fit for your organization, what you should apply for, and what you can deliver on time and on money, on budget, excuse me. So carefully follow the instructions, tell your proposal and specific budget into the funding body's priorities and guidelines, match and align to those. Use declarative rather than conditional verbs. We are, we will, rather than if you give the money to us, something might happen, which it may be. All right, when Brian comes back from holidays, whoever Brian is on the committee. All right. Shorter is better. Keep a proposal tight and details condensed. Document a need or problem on multiple levels, but be specific to your geographic and demographic area. Yes, it may be affecting the mid-north coast. Yes, it may be affecting central west. How is it affecting your area? Okay. So that means a little bit of research rather than just copying and pasting from those areas. So talk about an investment rather than a gift, avoid dwelling on problems, focus on opportunities. Grants are given for solutions, not problems. So don't focus the whole application on the problem, focus on the solution. That's what we award funding for. So highlight the problem, 20 or 30% value, highlight the solution, we award the funding for that. Provide a realistic assessment of the urgency. I know you needed the money yesterday, but it could be weeks or months before you're awarded the grant if you're successful, and you can't start on the project until that point in time. So again, look at this at your own discretion. This is a couple of grants writing exercises. Be good to practice them, all right? So have a look at them. Basically, you need a copy of the webinar because you need to practice, all right? Do a dummy run, get an old grant application, go through it, even last year's one that you were unsuccessful, okay? Project rationale has become a big thing for government now and any funding body, in fact, why the project's needed. Again, we're answering at the big why, right? Like any 5-year-old child, have your dinner, why? Go to bed, why? Stop playing PlayStation, why? Okay. So in order to do this, you need to explain all this that I put up on the screen in terms of bullet points, project rationale. Break it down, build it up. So let's you digest that for a couple of seconds. Very much, you need to have a narrative plus stats and facts. That's your grant application. Okay, and everything else I've said along the way as well, but quintessentially those two things. Okay, and obviously what am I leaving out? A budget. A budget needs to be in there as well. Okay, so again, find your friendly bookkeeper or accountant if you did pass maths at high school, because don't be speculative in terms of the figures. Okay, it needs to add up, obviously. So it needs to fit in with local planning. And, you know, obviously, obviously with an infrastructure piece, if you want to do it, if you're a sporting club, you know, has council got a master plan strategy for that site development already? How does it correlate to that? How does it match to that? Include that in your argument. All right. I want to see that compatibility. I want to see that you are subscribing to what other government agencies, departments are saying that needs to happen in the area, let alone the community sector yourself. So factor in, as I said, time management when things don't go according to plan. And we've seen that in the past couple of years with COVID and weather. Okay. So again, the people have been given extensions, obviously, because of COVID and the flooding, because of what's happening. All right. And rightly so. And again, the evaluation, I can't stress that enough. I just don't see enough of that, people doing evaluations. It's become a bugbear for funding bodies in public and private sector to chase down evaluations. Not good if you're trying to look at ascertaining future funding from those organizations when they're trying to chase you down for evaluations in the last funding round and you're about to apply for the next funding round. Okay. Budget. Again, what's your ability to be financially responsible? No artificial budget inflation. It costs what it costs. I get the quotes, obviously 3 optimum quotes ideally. Again, what you're requesting money for is in line with what we're providing money for as a funding body. Okay. Don't fund incidentals, don't fund overheads, don't fund necessarily operations, definitely don't fund wages unless prescribed as for a project officer to be applicable. All these things, right? It's not just money for everything. It's money for set criterion in terms of what will be funded. And again, obviously, the less you ask for, the more chance you have of getting it in terms of a grant. Because again, while it may be decreed that each grant gets a certain amount, sometimes it's lump sum funding, which means I'm trying to spread the love across a wide demographic and geographic in terms of funding. So a lot to be considerate of. And again, does everything need to be brand new? No, it doesn't. Okay, how can you optimize your ask? Again, think of a way of driving it down while still being effective, still having the money you need to manage to do what you want, but be more streamlined about it. Doesn't mean cutting corners. It just means more effective in your management of financing. Because obviously, if it's a multi-year funding and it's a multi-year project, we got to factor in inflation factor and salary increases if it is a project officer that's been allowed as well, but definitely the inflation, supply chain issues at the moment, obviously, for a lot of organizations, the costs associated with that. All these considerations need to be set down and categorized and thought about before you commit. So beware of including even minimal costs if not essential to the project. Costs should relate directly to the project itself. Otherwise, I see that as artificial budget inflation padding out. Right? It becomes, again, more of a wish than it does an investment opportunity. We don't do retrospective, as I said, and don't start anything, as I said, until we have actually committed the funding contract. Methodology, again, like Project Rationale, has become one of those big sections we've seen emphasized now in recent years. And again, basically, it's about the last bullet point. There should be a clear pathway linking individual stages of your project, because it's about that second bullet point there. The methodology should include a brief recap of the need, objectives, and expected impacts of the project. We must certainly provide a very clear description and explanation of how you're going to go about achieving those objectives. Lay it all out, spell it out, show the map. So need, objectives, impacts, similar to inputs, outputs, outcomes. Okay. But I should feel comfortable as an assessor that after I read through it, I know inherently what's going to happen with the money, when it's going to happen, and how it's going to happen. As I said, have an evaluation process. Evaluation begins day one, folks. All right. This is not CSI Wagga Wagga. All right. This is very much not an autopsy. All right. So it's very much thinking about how you're going to commit to that, how you're going to measure what's working, what's not working, so you can tweak, obviously, and amend accordingly to make it a purposeful funding application and a funding delivery model as well for you. So you need to start finding a way to do that, to continue to modify and delete, whether weekly, monthly, quarterly, as prescribed by the funding body, let alone yourself, because you need to show then it's on track. Okay. Now, again, the understanding is you're doing this as part of your best practice anyway as a community organization. You're measuring everything you're doing for community impact. As I said, that it's not last minute. Okay. So this is one of 5 project plans that I give out to my client base. Project title, less than 10 words, ideally 5 words. Project summaries, 100 words, encompassing the purpose of the project, the scope of it, the people involved, the financials, the timescales, the risks, the implementation. That's just 100 words. All right. They're just the headings. So again, it's thinking about what you need to be including in terms of your project. This is your project design before you even commit to the funding application itself. So you can extrapolate from this into the actual grant application itself. Okay. Because then you got your full project description of 1,000 words, all of that. Now I'm thinking inverse pyramid here, right? That we're going expansive in the first instance, draft 1, and then we're narrowing the focus as we go through the drafts before we press submit and send. Okay. So no, I'm trying to give you word limits around what we're seeing. 1,500 is usually an optimum character count in a grant application, but I'm working on a grant at the moment where we got 250 words in some of the answers, and then we need to put in 250 words is nothing. All right. So you got to be very deliberate in your word choice. So my top 10 tips: make it about your reader, your prospective client, because that's what they are. Answer the question, obviously. Try not to waffle. Make it clear what's in it for them, the return on investment. Be direct. Don't talk around the subject, talk at the subject. Avoid sweeping statements. Give great examples, those mini case studies of how you've delivered on funding in the past to what success. Remember, looks can kill. If it's written in a sloppy manner, reflects the sloppy organization that wrote it. Jog their memory if you've been in receipt of funding from them before and what a great job you did. And make it word perfect, as I said earlier on. Old journalistic adage, count your words and make your words count. Okay. And that's me. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. Feel free to contact me, but I'm going to open it up for questions now, folks. So feel free to unmute yourself. Feel free to use the chat room. I am here for you, basically. Pick my brain. Anyone? Have I scared everyone away? Or everyone just thinking, you know what? I could be just finished now in time for home and away. Come on, someone must have a question. I'm going to have to flip. Yes.
Tony Burns. Just you mentioned earlier about knowing what's out there.
Yes, Tony.
How do you do that? I mean, we keep an eye on local council. We keep an eye on government department websites.
Yeah.
Even nearly that's a full-time job.
It is. It is. But some of the great resources out there are local government, your state government department, regional development Australia are really good as well. They have a grants finder in a number of their portals. The government agencies and departments you talked about already, basically. And the other ones, the private service providers, you got Grants Guru, you got Grants Hub, you got Strategic Grants, you got Our Community, you got Pro Bono Australia. Their subscription services, you're going to pay a couple $100 per annum. You're going to get a fortnightly or monthly newsletter sent out to you. But a lot of councils now have subscribed to Grants Hub, and it's going to be a free resource in your local government authority that you just go in and use the search engine that they have provided for you. RDA have done that as well in certain instances as well. So why pay when you can get those resources for free? Now, they will encompass, Tony, not only government funding rounds, but philanthropic funding rounds as well, if you're eligible to apply.
And Tony, Joe McGurr here, we've got a link on our my website to a grant finding database. So if you go in there, you should be able to find it, just as Keith said, and it will take you to a range of private as well as government resources, and it can help. Thanks, Keith.
No, that's great, Joe, and that's the biggest compliment I can always pay to state and federal members. They're fantastically resourcing their communities. So get in contact with your members. Joe's obviously has that, and a number of other MPs do the same as well. I see some in the chat room, so I'm just going to look at those. Database there. Thank you very much for putting that up, Joe. So if you go to Joe McGurr Grant Guru, fantastic. Margaret, many applications have to be done online. Yes. Asking specific questions with limited space. Yes. It can be difficult to build in the information you said is desirable. Yes. So again, it's about squeezing it down, Margaret. So it's again looking at another incarnation of it. You're right. You don't have the expansive nature to write as many words as you want, but it's the elevator pitch, Margaret. How are you going to give it to me in 50, 150, 200 words or less, which means planning your answer, beginning, middle, end, embedding it with the real tangible stats and facts that are going to drive it and sell it at the end of the day. So I would look at basically having an impact first 20 words, the last 20 words around summing it up, and in the middle substantiate it with stats and facts. But more important, just answer the question. That's all I want in the first instance, basically, because this is like high school or university. Answer the question, get the marks. So again, in terms of scaling back those words, I would look at version control, Margaret, or drafting, as I said, because be expansive in the first instance for yourself, but then cut. Look, you'll find superfluous words. You'll find words that you're overused or redundant, basically, and you'll be able to edit. If you're don't have that capability, get someone to ask you to help you with that. Just get another set of eyes, or basically just go around the block with the dog, make yourself a cup of tea and come back and get a red pen and trying to cut out your own words. Sometimes you can't see the wood from the trees with your own application, but very much sometimes objectivity. But I just say there will be loads of words that are superfluous when you go back and look at it again. Give it 24 hours, you'll see words you can eradicate. Anyone else, folks?
Keith, can I just reiterate what you said about the conciseness about
yes
the answers? I mean, I read a fair bit, obviously required to, in my role, not just grants, but applications of one sort or another. And it is tiring to wade through words to get to the point.
Yeah, very much so.
And with some government documents, it's like translating Swahili, but and it gets irritating. And I think grant assessors, you do occasionally come across something that's written succinctly, and it's such a joy. So I just want to emphasize that it really, you almost feel like just giving it to them, because most people aren't that concise, but it is a discipline, Keith. So thanks for emphasizing that.
Yeah, very much so, Joe. I think that it is a discipline to itself, but it comes with practice, and I think everyone can do it. So I'll give you a tip here, folks, right? The first draft I do with most of my clients is on this device. I orally get them to dictate it. So we go through the questions and we record them. And then we listen back. And coming back to Margaret's comment, we look then at what we dispense, where they're being languid or wordy or expansive in the terminology. So if you don't feel comfortable writing in the first instance, talk it out. Just get your phone, record it, listen back to it, what you emphasize in terms of words, what words you're padding out, where you're waffling, where you're filling in the gaps. That's where you dump. So if you feel more comfortable, that's your first draft right there. Little trick of the trade. Okay, but it comes to practice. And another thing I want to say to you folks is use a thing called the alphabet game as well, which is writing out the A to Z of the alphabet. Look at all the keywords that you associate with your organization or your project or your program that you do. Find those key adjectives, nouns, pronouns, verbs, and accentuate those and build your narrative around that in your grant application. look at using the alphabet to create those words that you want to use to show indicative understanding of your own organization, let alone what the grant's there to do. And I talked about some of those words earlier on. So you might have I for innovation, S for sustainability, A for agile, or for robust, to give me that assurance that, you know, you can quantify and qualify. You're a professional organization at the end of the day. I've got a hand up here. Yep. Hi. You want to come off mute?
Unmute. Yeah. Sorry. I just wanted to ask, with regard to being concise, what's your view on using dot points instead of prose?
I love dot points.
Yeah, good.
I love dot points and I love subheadings. Because it's not about, people have this compulsion that I need to fill all the white space. It's not, it's optimizing. I mean, you can go 10% under in a grant application in terms of if there's a word count for 250, you can go 10% under. You can never go over. But again, it's quantifying, qualifying that the white space is your friend, not your enemy. It needs to be legitimized. Like, I need to see it. I need to understand it quite quickly and effectively, given the amount of literature that I'm reading. So very much basically use that to your advice. So use subheadings, use bullet points. Now we're seeing people, if they're being allowed to use infographics, use their attachments tactfully in terms of what they're uploading and what they're attaching, including video evidence as well, which we're seeing a lot of. So understanding that, people for infrastructure projects using drone footage, people basically for a community development project are using a community piece of business storytelling, 30 seconds to 3 minutes in duration. You got to be shrewd about this, and you got to think about tactile about ahead of time around that, basically, at the end of the day. No problem, Margaret, you're more than welcome. Any final questions, folks, before you wrap it up? Can we thank Dr. McGurr for putting this on as well? Much appreciated. Thanks for having me again, Joe.
Keith, it's been great to have you. Thank you for that. I think there was a lot in what you've presented today that actually, with the recording, I think we'll be able to unpack. I think that, look, an old adage I love is that it takes you 10 minutes to write a sermon that lasts an hour, and it takes you an hour to write a sermon that lasts 10 minutes. And, you know, it does take a lot of effort to be not just concise, but to the point, clear about your objective, clear about your sales pitch and your elevator pitch. So I think that discipline's an important thing. And I think there's a lot of rich material in your presentation. So it'll be good to have that as a resource. So Keith, thank you to you. And wrapping this up, can I thank everyone who participated, and thank you for the work you do for your communities. As my dad always said, there's nothing like the thanks you get when someone wants something done. And of course, with all of you, of course, you're going to be doing more work for your communities. I know you are. Hopefully you'll get some funding, some ideas for funding that will help you in it. So on that note, I think we might call it a night, Keith. And I just want to thank Rochelle from my team for helping us with this. And again, thank you to everybody who participated. Good night.
Good night. Get that grant. Stay safe. Take care.